thank you so much for the invitation, Luis and Nova. It's a pleasure to be here to tell you about patient innovation, this project that I created with colleagues, colleagues in the medical field, like Helena Canhão, who's in the audience from the Nova Medical School, and also colleagues in my field, like Lady Zinolovich, and other people that I have seen in the audience. Let me start from where we started, in fact. I mean, we at some point met this man. This man came actually to Portugal twice, and he told us his story. And, you know, Tel Goldsworthy at some point went to see his doctor, and his doctor told him that he was going to die. And this is not good news, obviously. This was in 2002. In 2002, his doctor explained to him that because of his Marfan syndrome situation, Tol basically is a very big man, and one of his problems is that his aorta is not as big, as strong as it should be. So he said, you know, because of your situation, I'm expecting that you could have a rupture at some point soon. A rupture that we cannot really fix because it's around the aorta. So in fact, what the doctor was suggesting is that he should actually sit or lay down in bed so that he would reduce the chances of having problems. You know, this was in 2002, and he told him, I expect something to go wrong in the next 2 years. And Tel went home really unhappy with the news, of course, and he thought about it and thought, look, this is ridiculous, because as an engineer, he knows that if you have a pipe at home that could have a rupture, you put something around it, right? And he was wondering, how come the medical field doesn't have a solution for that? At home, he started working on a solution. What he realized is, well, I'll give it a try, because even if I develop something that doesn't work, in fact, I will die, which is something that the doctor told me that is going to happen anyway. So, I mean, what he did at home is what you see up there, right? That device, that supporting aorta, that in fact, that aortic support, sorry, that in fact, a couple of months later, he presented to his doctor. He walked into the doctor's office and told him, look, you told me that I'm going to die, but with your help, maybe if I put this thing around the aorta, I could survive. There we go. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you do this at home, but he convinced the doctor in England to put this aortic support around his aorta. And he convinced the doctor, and we are all glad he did it, because in fact, he saved his life and saved the life of 56 other people that have received the same aortic support. That's an invitation up there from a party that he threw out 2 years ago, when he had 56 patients that have received the same aortic support that he developed for himself. So why am I telling you about Tel? Because, you know, in our research, and we care about the sources of innovation, what we were finding were lots of examples like Tel Goldsworthy, in which basically someone, when faced with a high level of need, developed something to help him cope with his own disease. I could tell you about 600 stories like the one that I just told you, because those are the 600 technologies that we have until now actually identified, curated, and that we have in our platform. Solutions like this one. At some point, Amit Goffer, an engineer as well, got paralyzed in a car accident. Look, this is the man that developed the exoskeleton that you see up there that allows a tetraplegic to walk. I mean, this is now a very expensive toy. This actually costs $85,000. But think about it. It's a completely different story from the one that we typically hear when we talk about innovation in the medical field. Now we are talking about patients as the ones that actually develop something new, which, if we think about it, makes some sense, right? Because if the need is the mother of invention, if you actually live with a chronic disease, sometimes a fatal disease, it's normal that you actually try to do something around it. Another guy, another man, another friend of ours that at some point we studied in great detail. Louis Plant suffers from a cystic fibrosis. It's a complicated disease. I'm not going to try to tell you everything about it. I'm not a medical doctor. But one of the problems here is that these people have to clean the lungs. If they don't clean the lungs, they will have lung infections and they will end up dying. Not good. In fact, the life expectancy here used to be 5 years. Now this life expectancy is about 40. It's a good improvement, right? Many of the solutions that work were actually developed by patients. Let me show you one of them. I mean, many of the solutions that the historical solutions were based on a very basic principle, which is the ketchup bottle principle. How do you take the ketchup out of the bottle? Well, you turn it upside down and you actually clap until the ketchup comes out, right? Because these people have mucus that is very thick, it's very hard to take the mucus out of the lungs. And they actually need to do that. So what for a long time people did was to take kids upside down. Sometimes they would put kids in humid rooms because this would help loosen the mucus from the lungs. And then with a lot of chest clapping, the mucus would come out. It's not nice. I mean, at some point, in fact, Louis had a lung transplant, and he tells me, look, it was really a nightmare because what happened is that the operation didn't go very well. I was having lots of fevers after the operation, and my body was hurting, even if I wasn't moving, and I had to do up to 4 hours per day of chest clapping. So we can just imagine how bad this was, right? I mean, one day, something really intriguing happened to Louis. He went to a concert, it was classical music, and he realized that when the musicians played, he would start coughing. And then the musician stopped playing, and he would stop coughing. And this happened over and over again. It was actually very uncomfortable for him, very embarrassing, because in a classical music concert, you are supposed to be silent, right? And people were looking at him, giving him weird looks, because, for instance, during the break, he was absolutely fine. And people were wondering, look, this is your chance to do all your coughing, right? But he was fine. So it got worse after the break because the andamento of the music increased, and he realized that he had to leave the concert. He had this huge crisis of coughing and expectoration. He went home thinking about it and realized, wow, this is happening because I was sitting in front of the speakers. So I was getting all this music vibration that was vibrating the lungs, and this was actually good. I mean, the bad news is that, in fact, I cannot control the music, right? And I cannot go to a concert every day, but maybe I can do something at home. And what he did at home was remarkable, because he started experimenting with speakers. He would put the speakers in front of the lungs and now actually control for the music, because maybe the best vibrations were the ones that he did not need the music. So the next thing was, let me try to cut the sound, right? So we got rid of the sound, and making a long story short, he developed the frequencer, the machine that you see up there, which seems to work very well. I mean, one day he was in a meeting with me in my office at Católica, and what he did was, for half an hour, we were having a chat, and he had this thing in front of his lungs. Half an hour later, he asked me for the restrooms. Where are the restrooms? I need to go to the restroom. I'm sure he did his expectoration, and he was fine. Well, sort of speak, of course, because it's still a fatal disease. But think about it. The life expectancy was 5 years old, and now it's 40. And when we studied different solutions around cystic fibrosis, we found that half of those solutions had been developed by patients. And this was quite unusual, right? I mean, first, we found a doctor that published a very good paper at New England Journal of Medicine. When we talked to him, he told us, look, in fact, this idea came from a patient, came from Emil Jäger. This doctor was suggesting the use of saline waters to clean the lungs, to clean the airways. Well, he actually is the first to recognize this is not my idea. This came from a patient in Australia who was a surfer. And she realized that while she was surfing, she was cleaning the lungs. This was very cool. So I wrote a paper about it. Or another doctor in New Zealand who was suggesting jumping in trampolines as something that could work really well for kids. Again, we contacted this guy, and he told us, no, this is something that came from parents. Sometimes the caregivers, right? But it's a common story. And when we, in fact, did a paper about it, we concluded that about 50% of the solutions had been developed by patients or caregivers, by what we call in our literature users. I mean, sometimes we even found examples of patients that identified new diseases. Herb Kern, for instance, was an engineer from AT&T. I hope he's still alive, but if he's alive, he's now under 4 or 5 years old, because I talked to him when he was under 2. This man, at some point, realized that he was often depressed. He had no idea but he started making notes about the days in which he was depressed. He would mark the calendar. Today I'm depressed, tomorrow I'm fine. And he did that for 15 years. He collected data for 15 years, and he started analyzing the patterns. And he realized, wow, I'm depressed in those days in which I don't have natural sunlight. That's really bad, because I cannot turn on the sun. But he concluded that he could probably turn on big lamps in front of his body, which he did. So think about it. He discovered a new disease called seasonal affective disorder, and he also found the treatment for that. He was so happy with data from 15 years that he prepared a nice report that he submitted to the National Institute of Mental Health in Washington. He thought, these people that are studying the sources of depression will be so happy when they see what I found. And then he was so disappointed because guess what? Nobody even replied, right? It took him a while to actually convince someone to do something about it. It was another guy that is also a patient and a doctor. Dr. Norm Rosenthal was the only one that cared about him. He's from the National Institute of Mental Health. He wrote 2 books. He's actually the one that came up with the name. And what's interesting here, and sad at the same time, is that this doctor who wrote 2 books recognizes in his first book, first chapter, that is called My SAD Story, My Seasonal Affective Disorder Story. He says, look, to be completely honest, the only reason why I first cared about this is because I realized that I had the same symptoms. After moving from South Africa to Minnesota, I wasn't getting exposed to the same amount of sun, so, I was getting depressed. And we are all glad, of course, that he got interested in this, because he was the one that validated the disease, that gave a name to the disease. But think about it. We are talking now about extreme levels of resistance, which is something that we know from the innovation literature, right? There's nothing new here. I mean, resistance on one side and lack of diffusion. What's interesting is that it's not just the patients that innovate, but also the parents. At some point we met Joaquina. Joaquina, as the name suggests, is Portuguese. She's the mother of a kid with Angelman syndrome. I mean, her problem is complicated, or her son's problem, but one of the problems is that when these kids are supposed to stand up and walk, they just don't do that. They lay down in floor. They don't start walking. I mean, her son was already 7 years old, and he wasn't able to walk. And she tried all sorts of things. She's always trying solutions. Nothing seemed to work. Except that one day she went to a party one Saturday afternoon, and there were some million balloons floating around. And she was really intrigued, because for the first time, she could see her son excited with something. Her son actually started jumping to get the balloons. And this is a kid that she could never get excited with anything. So she thought to herself, really? So I have the solution, right? The next thing she did was she went and bought lots of balloons. She spread the balloons around the house. The balloons were floating around, and their son was super tired, jumping from balloon to balloon to try to get them all. Think about it, because this solution really helped this patient. And when I start talking about this solution in audiences like the ones that we have here today, I was really intrigued, because I started getting feedback from the audience saying, thanks for sharing. My son has the same disease or has a different disease. Once I had a mother saying, I think my son is just very lazy, but it works. And there was a problem, right? The problem is diffusion. It shouldn't be necessary to listen to a talk for you to know about this. I mean, once I think I can say this, but it was actually the president of a big bank in Portugal that came to me and said, look, my grandson has this problem. I care a lot about this. I go to conferences. I talk to the best doctors. I never heard about this. I was SMSing my daughter, the mother of the son, of course, and she never heard about this. So there is a problem here, which is a problem of diffusion. These solutions often don't diffuse. Some do, right? Some actually make it to market, like the ones that you see here. Debbie from Israel has a son with cerebral palsy. She developed what you see up there on the corner, which is the UPSI, this device that allows these kids to walk. Or, Keely's father is now trying to commercialize what you see at the left. Keely has to do chemotherapy, which means she needs to be stuck to a hospital bed for many hours. He realized, wow, maybe I can do something to fix this. And what he did was this backpack, which allows his daughter to actually walk around and do chemotherapy, intravenous chemotherapy, without being stuck to a place. It makes sense that it's the father that thinks about this, right? And not a medical instruments company. Because, patients, caregivers often see things that others don't see. I mean, in our research, and this was a paper that we first did with Leif Zinovich, with Elena Canhão, with Eric Van Ippel from MIT, we actually interviewed 500 people here in Portugal that suffer from chronic rare diseases. And what we found was really interesting because, first thing is that 36% of the audience said that they had done something new. And 36% is huge, right? So we were very suspicious about this. We couldn't believe it. So we asked a team of doctors at the Hospital Santa Maria to have a look. And they did. And they still found 40 solutions out of 500 patients that we randomly picked in a rare disease association that were new. According to our literature, they were new to the world. Think about it. If 8% of the patients develop something that is new to the world, this is huge. Right? Because there are millions of patients out there. There are millions of patients that potentially are innovating. That means that we could do something about it, which we did, because there are other problems. On one side, these innovations are not going anywhere. They are not diffusing, even if they are super important for the quality of life. So that's when we thought that we could try to do something. And, without trying to give you theory here, but what Eric Van Ippel found at some point is that apart from innovation in companies, there is innovation among users that have needs. We were finding this for healthcare. What's the problem? Often the patients don't know how to diffuse. Often the patients have limited abilities to develop these solutions. So many of these things don't go anywhere. We thought that we could maybe try to help fixing the problem. And what we created was this platform. It's a platform that was launched 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago. It was actually February 2014. And since then, we've got lots of solutions from everywhere. So what's the platform all about? Well, it's a place where patients from different geographies, different diseases, can actually come and share what they did, that they think it's new. And, if it's in fact safe and new, our Chief Medical Officer, Elena Canhão, will approve the solution and the solution will be shared. In fact, lots of things that are submitted are not shared because they don't think they are very safe. But even without sharing everything, what we have now is a portfolio of 600 solutions. This is the growth rate in the past 2 years. And we are now about 600. The graph goes to about 500. These solutions come from over 30 countries, all the way down to South Korea. We have at least one from South Korea. But, the US is the main contributor, Portugal, England, Brazil, Australia. And there's a reason for this. In the beginning, actually, the platform was only available in Portuguese and English, so it makes sense that it's Portuguese and English-speaking countries. Let me tell you about this, that when we were half of the size that we are now, when we had 300 solutions, the European Commission said that we were the largest deal flow of medtech in Europe, which was really nice, right? Now we doubled the size, and I think we probably kept the solution. I mean, other nice things that happened to us, let me share them here, is that we got a very strong support from patient associations everywhere, from Australia to Malaysia to Brazil, from everywhere. At some point we were actually signing protocols, then we stopped signing protocols because we had no more ability to sign more protocols. We've got very nice endorsements, like the United Nations at some point wrote something nice on their website. We are very excited about this project. They invited us to present the project in New York. I always remember the afternoon when my secretary calls me. My secretary is a lovely lady, but she always gets the names wrong. I mean, I remember when she called me and said, you know, Professor, you have a call from Nações Unidas. And I thought to myself, this must be from Parque das Nações. And it was actually from Nações Unidas, which was very nice. And then we presented the project in New York. Then we participated in this competition at Harvard. And it was very cool because out of 475 projects, we were the only non-US semi-finalists. But actually more than that, in terms of votes from the crowd, we've got more votes than any other project. And if you allow me not to be very modest, maybe I'm not being modest anyway, you know, we've got 5 times more votes than the second project that got more votes. Then the European Commission called us a startup to follow, which was intriguing because we weren't even a startup, but that's fine. And the Virgin Airlines, you know, they have these magazines on board. They wrote a very nice article about us, and people ask me, how did you manage to have that? And I have no idea how that happened, because we don't really invest in marketing. I mean, 2 months ago, more or less, we were invited to be at the World Government Summit. This is a big summit, as the name suggests, of world leaders. The main speaker was Obama. And then they invited, in fact, 11 projects from everywhere. And we were one of those projects, to our surprise. And in fact, we had this stand with some of the innovations at the entrance of the meeting. And then it was really amazing, because during 3 days, people would stop by and try to learn about our project. And often it was embarrassing because we didn't even know the person that we were talking with until he leaves and someone tells us, you know, you should have paid attention because he's Prime Minister of Pakistan. So, you know, all these things happened, and now things that are happening are also cool. The Science Museum in London invited us to be part of an exhibition in which they are going to showcase innovations that are beyond the labs, things that are not happening where they were supposed to happen, right? One of the things is that we are going to be the health side of that exhibition. That will be in London this summer. In fact, the dates are not exactly those ones. It will start July 7. It will be in London for 2 months, and then it's going to travel to 28 countries, including Portugal, and will be seen by millions of people, according to them. I mean, literally 2 weeks ago, I guess, April 21, this newspaper, apparently this very popular newspaper in Africa, was talking about us. It's a long article saying that our platform is already helping Africa meet the Sustainable Development Goals, which is something that is very surprising to us, I should admit. But you know, I'm sharing this because this is quite amazing, right? The sort of things that can happen when you put together, for a very low budget, I can tell you, a platform for patients to share what they did. And then, sometimes we are really surprised. Let me tell you about Ivan Owen. Ivan Owen is a puppeteer from Seattle. I mean, a puppeteer develops puppets, customers for theater, right? I mean, one of the things that he uses to do is like ants, like the ones that you see up there. He does that without any purpose except his own work. At some point, the one he did is the one at the right, in the corner. It's ugly, right? It looks like Eduardo Mãos de Tesoura. But it moves. And for some reason, or for no reason, he actually posted that online, because we post stuff online for no reason. He did a YouTube of that and posted that on a YouTube. So, to his surprise, he immediately got a call from Richard Van Ass, a guy from South Africa that is actually in the picture, and his mail was saying, look, I'm a carpenter, I used to have 5 fingers, and now the machine just chopped 3 of them, and it's really sad because I've got only 2. And I saw your hand, which is not my dream hand, of course, but it moves, right? And it seems very cheap. And that helps because, you know, I don't have money for a real prosthetic that could cost $10,000, $15,000. But I think I could afford something like that. Would you mind doing something for me? I mean, what happened is that, in fact, Ivan Owen helped Richard Van Aast to get a prosthetic. And then the BBC wrote about this. And at the same time, you know, Ivan Owen got involved with us through the platform. We got to meet him. And that's when Carla, the mother of Nuno, comes into our office and says, look, I know that you do 3D printing. My son, and Nuno was there with her, in fact was born without the hand and arm, and what you could do would be to print something for us. This was really a challenge because we had no idea how to do that, but she said, guess what, I have the code because actually Ivan Owen gave me the code. What happened is that we were having a conference at Gulbenkian that weekend, so many of us went to Gulbenkian for the weekend, many of the people in the audience in fact, and during one weekend we worked on what you see over there. This solution took less than, I mean, we were having a conference and printing at the same time, took less than 2 days to develop, took about, or costed us about 18 euros. It's a prosthetic that costs 18 euros. It's not very impressive. I know that you would be impressive if I said that this costs 2 million, right? But no, it costs 18 euros, but allows Nuno to grab things. For the first time in his life, he's able to actually do things for 18 euros and a couple of hours. Think about it. I mean, these are people, you know, you see actually Elena, Leid in the picture, some of the other people that help us develop this. Well, this is me doing arm wrestling with him, which I won. You know, think about it. Think about the power of the crowd, as we sometimes say, in this case, the power of patience. I mean, what I'm saying should be basic, right? Because if the need is the mother of invention, makes a lot of sense that when faced with a need, patients innovate. And what I've been telling you is this story about our platform that, according to the theory, help us fix some of the problems that users often have. I mean, what are we doing now? What we are trying to do now is to help patients create firms. We know that we are a very large deal flow of medtech. We have, you know, the dream of creating companies that are created or co-created by the patients, the caregivers, and, you know, developing here in Lisbon an ecosystem of those companies. That's what we are trying to do now, and soon you will hear more about that, the Health Innovation Lab. And who are we? I mean, I told you about some of my friends that are here in the audience, Elena, Chief Medical Officer and other project leader, Lady Olevich, our Research and Operations Officer, a couple of other medical doctors in the upper side. And then in the other part, you have some of our advisory board. There's one guy missing in the picture, he's the most recent member. In fact, now we have 3 Nobel laureates in our advisory board. Believe me or not, we didn't know these people until they actually approached us and said, this is super cool, can we help? And we said, sure. Yeah, we thought it was a good idea to have people like Richard Roberts, Aaron Shishanover, or even Bob Langer, who's not yet a Nobel laureate, but everyone says he's going to be soon. So I will not talk much about this. These are some of other supporters that have been important for the project. What I wanted to just say is that, you know, innovation comes from lots of different sources. Most of the discussion until now has been around companies. Most of the discussions until now, not just in this audience, everywhere. I mean, what we are talking about is innovation coming from the patients. And guess what? If we believe that the need is the mother of invention, this probably makes a lot of sense, right? And what we are saying here shouldn't really surprising you. Should not be surprising to you. So, I mean, let me just end with this quote from our supporter and friend, Richard Roberts, who believes that this is an outstanding use of social media that should help many disadvantaged people. And I am sharing this because I think he's absolutely right. Thank you.